I am the good shepherd. A good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. A hired man who is not a shepherd and whose sheep are not his own sees a wolf coming and leaves the sheep and runs away, and the wolf catches and scatters them. That is because he works for pay and has no concern for the sheep. I am the good shepherd, and I know mine, and mine know me, just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father. And I will lay down my life for the sheep. I have other sheep that do not belong to this fold. These also I must lead, and they will hear my voice, and there will be one flock, one shepherd. That is why the Father loves me, because I lay down my life in order to take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down on my own. I have the power to lay it down and the power to take it up again. This command I have received from my Father. The Gospel of the Lord. Last weekend I saw a short clip of the funeral for Prince Philip that was held at Windsor Castle. And the commentator said at one point, Prince Philip was the husband of the Queen for 73 years, but he was also the husband of duty and service to the nation and the Church of England all his life. And so at that point they showed a whole bunch of trumpeters playing a British Navy tune entitled Call to Service that he had personally selected for his funeral. And that was the jingle, that was the tune he heard during World War II and beyond, the melody that stirred him to action to be willing to lay down his life for his country. As a Navy man, just like Father Zach, who today celebrates 63 years of being a priest, as a Navy man and so many others of the greatest generation, some of whom are here this morning at Mass, Prince Philip attuned his ears to hear the call to duty and service. So that's the connection I'd like to make to begin this homily on Good Shepherd Sunday. We're here at Mass because we have heard the call of the Good Shepherd inviting us to follow him. That invitation invariably comes through human channels, the interventions, the invitations of others to pay attention to Jesus and his call to follow him, his call to service. And certainly we recognize that today, particularly in this First Communion Mass, the 7 First Communicants, Sophia, Lucia, John, Mia, Taylor, Julia, and Luca, because each of you have heard the call from your parents, and your parents heard the call from their parents, your grandparents, all the way back. And so every time we come to church, we celebrate that connection that we have in faith to pay attention to God speaking to us. Faith is a gift that comes by way of a giver. Ultimately, the giver is Jesus, but it's also through our parents and many others who inspire us and challenge us to live the faith. And so faith is really something that's first caught. It's caught by example and witness, and then later it's taught in different ways. So the word we use is call or summons to describe the experience that brings us here today. People come to faith because of what they've heard. And so that call isn't just a singular moment, a singular event. You know, when we have relationships with people, we don't get one phone call or one invitation and never hear from them again. Rather, we become accustomed to hearing that person's voice, and it becomes familiar. And so we respond to that voice. The call of Jesus is the same way. It doesn't occur just once in baptism and then fade away. Instead, we seek to hear that voice again and again. So each of you, the 7 of you, received that call that your parents took on for you at baptism, and now that you're making this step of First Communion, later on in confirmation, and maybe hopefully holy orders or matrimony or different ways that each of you are going to continue to hear the call, and especially to celebrate that call to the sacraments. And that's why all of us come back here week after week to listen to the voice of the shepherd. Because when a relationship is real and authentic, the sound of a friend's voice is something that we recognize anywhere. Whether somebody calls us on the phone and says, hello, we know who that person is right away. Or on the street, or a shout across the auditorium, we recognize the voice. That's him, that's her. For many years, before my mother passed away a year ago this past week, I always had the practice, and I started it years ago, of saving her messages on the phone that she left, or taking videos of her, with the intention that I'd be able to always hear that voice long after she died. And I started doing that years ago when a fellow priest who had just lost his mother lamented, only after a couple of months or so, that he could no longer hear his mother's voice. The gospel today urges us to be attentive, and to follow the voice of Jesus, the Good Shepherd, to listen to the voice of our parents and grandparents who call us to faith and who invite us to hear Jesus, asking us to be nurtured and to follow him in the ways of faith. But following his voice is becoming increasingly difficult in our modern society. Every day, we all know, there are hundreds and perhaps hundreds more other voices out there calling our names, clamoring for our attention, and competing for our allegiance. They offer various formula for health and wealth and happiness and solving problems and getting along with people and raising children and avoiding depression, becoming popular, getting ahead, whatever it might be. Some of them are good, some of them not so good. These contemporary shepherds, with a small s, guarantee results. Whether it be with cars or clothes or cosmetics, something is going to make life great for us. You know, it's surprising how much the quality of our lives are affected by the voices we tune into, from the plethora of good and not so good and even bad shepherds out there calling us to follow them. Whole societies can be brought to misery by the voice of a tyrant, a dictator, demanding that people suffer deprivation and shed their blood for some political gain. Just look at what it's happening in Europe and Ukraine. Families remain stuck sometimes in conflict because their value systems are dictated by the voice of an aggressively competitive ethic. And sometimes our personal lives can be in trouble and turmoil and depression because we follow the voice of some marketer who convinces us that we could not possibly be happy without a certain lifestyle or hairstyle or car model or body build or whatever it might be. But it's astonishing. And that's why we're here at Mass again today. It's astonishing how much the quality of our lives can be upgraded by tuning out those other voices and following the shepherd who has our best interest at heart and leads us to nourishing pastures. So as we reflect upon today's beautiful gospel in this First Communion Mass, I think it's urgent that we try to become sharply critical and discerning of the various voices and alternative choices out there vying for our attention and our allegiance. So who is my shepherd? Who is your shepherd? Who most influences you and me in our decisions? Jesus speaks today about the hired hand. And he says, don't pay attention to that hired hand who wants to get your attention. And as somebody once said to me, Don't give the devil a ride in your head, because he'll always want to drive. Or as Father Cardone said in his recent Lenten mission here, when you pray the Hail Mary, say, "Hail Mary, full of grace, punch the devil in the face." In other words, don't listen to the deceiving voice of the bad shepherds out there, hurting us away from God. The devil and his minions are the hired hands who don't care for the sheep and who bring on the wolves to scatter us and to divide us as a nation, as a church, sometimes even as a family. The Good Shepherd knows you and me, and he pleads with us today to attune our hearts and our minds to his call, just as we know we can recall various musical melodies that stir us into action, and just like that Navy tune stirred Prince Philip to action. And so if we feel confused by conflicting messages out there, isn't it to our advantage to tune out those voices and to tune into the one who tells us today, "I am the Good Shepherd"?